Hi, we're back. Yesterday we were introduced to a couple different things actually. You were introduced to the performance task that we are going to hopefully answer by the end of this week. You were also introduced to nonfiction text structures. That's different ways. There's actually 5 that authors of nonfiction text can organize the information. And the last thing that you were introduced to was a nonfiction article. It was about basketball, and the title of it was Tying the Score. And today we're going to revisit that article. We're going to discuss some of the nonfiction text features that appear throughout the text, and we're going to talk about how they help us as a reader. And we're also going to focus on the text structure of 2 different sections of that text. So follow along. You will need your Making Meaning workbook, open to pages 8 and 9, and you will also need a pencil. Okay, so right now you should have your Making Meaning workbook open to pages 8 and 9, and you are looking at the text Tying the Score. This was the text that we were introduced to yesterday. Right now I want you to first think about what information you recall from yesterday's read aloud. What do you remember? Take a moment, think to yourself. Okay, so we remember a couple of things. This article is about basketball, right? The topic, I guess, would be basketball. It also focuses on like men's basketball, and we learned that the NBA, or the National Basketball Association, is referring to the men's league, and then the WNBA is the Women's National Basketball Association. And we also learned that there are some differences between the two. And we also noticed that we've got a lot of great text features here that help support our understanding as we were reading through the text. So today we're going to jump right in and we're going to take a look at those. I know that there was a photograph on the first page showing me an example or a player from the men's basketball league. And then on the second page in the article, I see a female player from the WNBA. We also talked about this text feature right here that I want to focus on for just a moment. The league stats. So this is a chart and there's 2 columns here. The first column gives me information about the men's league, the NBA, and then the second column gives me information about the women's league, the WNBA. So I want you to think for just a moment, what was the purpose of this chart? Why would our author include this chart in the article? Think for a moment to yourself. If you have someone next to you, you can turn and talk to a partner. Okay, so now I have a few questions for you guys regarding this chart. The first thing, on average, what is the number of people who go to WNBA games? Right, we can see that right down here at the bottom. The average game attendance, that's the people who are attending the game. This was back in 2013, but it's around 7,500. When you look over here at the NBA, however, you can see that in 2013, there's quite a large difference. We have 17,000 people attending their games. I have another question for you. Which league has more teams? That's right, the NBA. We can see right here, the second part, the number of teams, there are 30, and in the WNBA, there are only 12. Question number 3. How much larger are NBA basketballs than WNBA basketballs? Right, when we look right here, we can see the ball circumference in the men's league, the NBA, measures 29.5 or 29.5 inches, and in WNBA, the women's league, it is measuring 28.5 or 28.5. So there's a difference of 1 inch in the circumference or the size of the ball. The last question. You're kind of putting all these pieces together, right? So what can you say now about the WNBA, and the NBA just from looking at this chart. So good readers, boys and girls, we're often using these nonfiction text features to help us better understand the text. And right now, I think that the purpose of this text feature, it really is kind of a side-by-side comparison, right? It's almost like a comparing and contrasting the two leagues, and an inference that we might make based on the information included in this chart is that the NBA is overall probably more successful and even more popular based on the information that was given here than the WNBA. I can see there are more teams. It's even taking place in more locations. We have the US as well as Canada. The ball circumference really doesn't tell me much about its popularity though. But then we look right here. The average player's salary and then also the number of people attending the game. We see a huge discrepancy or a difference in those amounts. Great job looking at that chart and talking about the purpose of that nonfiction text feature and how it helped us as readers. I want to go back to the beginning. We've talked about some of these text features, but you recorded a graphic organizer from Mrs. Connor yesterday in your reading notebook. And you guys were talking about the different ways that an author can organize or structure informational text. And we learned that there are 5 different ways, right? We have problem and solution, comparing and contrasting, description, sequence, and cause and effect. So now I want to look at one section of this article, and we want to kind of talk through this and see if we can determine how the author organized this paragraph. We're going to focus on this section, in the basket. So right now I just want to reread that to you, and I want you guys following along. In 1891, PE teacher James Naismith took on a challenge to find an indoor game that would keep rowdy students busy during the cold winter months. He had the caretaker nail up a peach basket at each end of the gymnasium, and the game of basketball was born. Little did Naismith know that this sport would grow to be one of the most watched games in the world, and that the players would be paid multi-million-dollar salaries. Well, the male players, that is. Okay, so let's pause for a moment, and I want you to think. What's happening here in this paragraph, or this section of the text? Think to yourself. If you have someone next to you, you can turn and talk. So I know that there's this PE teacher, Mr. Naismith, and he has this challenge, right? It's really cold outside, and imagine like you're a PE teacher, so you're trying to find something for your students to do. So they can't go outside because it's the middle of the winter and it's cold, so it might be snowing. And they're trying to find an indoor game to keep these students occupied or entertained or give them something like physical activity to do. So he tries to come up with an idea, and he nails these peach baskets to each end of the gymnasium. So one on each end, and there you go, basketball is born, and little did he know it was going to become so popular. So now we think back to text structures, and we know that there are 5. I know it's not sequence. It's not telling me like the order in which basketball was, created or how it evolved over the years. It's not really comparing and contrasting anything. When I reread this paragraph, what I recognized is that this PE teacher was faced with a problem, and he found a solution. Therefore, this paragraph is organized using the text structure problem and solution. So I'm going to pause this video, and I'm going to pull up a graphic organizer where we can record and track our thinking. Okay, we've made it to the final section of this video, And we are completing this graphic organizer to kind of keep track of our thinking as we're talking about the structure of the text. Again, we're focusing on just that section in the basket. So we talked about it, but now we're going to record our thinking here. You can see there are two boxes that you are going to be completing this week. The first one says, the text structure of the section in the basket is, so when I click here, we've already talked about this, boys and girls, and we've identified that text structure, and it was problem and solution. Now I need to complete this part where I provide some evidence to support my thinking. We've given you this language frame here to kind of start your response. I know that the text structure of this section is, so I am actually going to fill in problem and solution here. Because